The way we remember is through our actions. One remarkable organization reflects the unrelenting, helpful actions of committed, concerned, compassionate, caring individuals whose very motto is, "You can do something about the Holocaust." We dedicate the next portion of our program to the Mitzvah Project's efforts to provide life-saving aid to elderly and forgotten Holocaust survivors scattered throughout Eastern Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, the Survivor Mitzvah Project founder and recipient of the 2011 KCET Local Hero Award, Zane Busby.
It's really an honor to be here tonight. By way of introduction, I am a television comedy director, which I know is absolutely miles away from the Holocaust. But in 2001, I went on a trip to Eastern Europe to visit and seek out the birthplaces of my grandparents, and my life was forever changed. I want to tell you a little bit about this story because it's my story, but it's a small part of a bigger story that we're all a part of. As we do every year, and for some people every day, we remember the 6 million Jewish lives that were lost and brutally murdered. We remember the millions of others who were killed during the darkest days of the 20th century. 6 million. 6 million. It's an impossible number to comprehend. It is so large a number that it is unimaginable. 6 million. But it's so important to remember these were 6 million individuals, individual lives with hopes and dreams for the future. 6 million people, poets, musicians, dancers, students and teachers, doctors and laborers and craftsmen, scholars, mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sons and daughters, friends and relations and children. 6 million lives cut short. That anyone survived this slaughter is a miracle. We can only give them our thanks. Thank you for living. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for telling us about your experiences. Thank you for remembering so that future generations will never forget. For the people who survived, who still live in Eastern Europe, in what is known as the Bloodlands, the places where the killings took place, sadly, the world has truly forgotten about them. I never knew they existed, not until that trip I took in 2001. It was an incredible experience. When I arrived in Eastern Europe, the first thing that struck me was how close the war seemed in these strange lands. The buildings were in great disrepair. There were bullet holes on the facades. Everything seemed like it just happened yesterday. Villages were empty and rotting away. It was an incredible ruin of a landscape. It made the period of the Holocaust seem so close. As if it was yesterday, I was going down the same streets, crossing these same rivers, passing these same forests, these same swamps where hundreds hid and thousands were murdered. And as I explored my own roots, I discovered much more than I was seeking. I found elderly survivors living in tiny huts without food, without heat, without medical aid, without anyone at all to help them. Alone and forgotten, they were still suffering. It was as if the war never really ended. Now, who were these people? What were their stories? Many were sole survivors of their families. Some were brave partisans that fought in the forests of Belarus. Some survived evacuations where they were bombarded by German airstrikes. All of them running away from the Einsatz group and the mobile killing squads who roared into towns and villages on motorcycles, killing every man, woman, and child in their path, in the most brutal of ways, by the hundreds of thousands, and then torched their villages to the ground. These people are truly the unluckiest generation. The oldest people that I met, born in 1911, experienced World War I and the Russian Revolution as children. Civil war, dislocation, evacuation, widespread violence. If they survived that, along came the pogroms of the 1920s and the famines of the 1930s imposed by Stalin. Thousands were murdered, thousands starved to death. And if they survived that, came the rise of Nazism, and then the full-blown Holocaust with Eastern Europe receiving the greatest losses of all the other areas combined: families killed, evacuation, starvation, ghettoization, slave labor, more loss, more destruction. And if they survived that, they were caught behind the Iron Curtain, where it was a crime again to be Jewish, to own a Yiddish book, to speak their own language, a crime. And if they survived that, came Stalin's purges of the 1950s, when many were sent to the Gulag for an additional 10-year sentencing. Families perished, more loss, more dislocation. Then a few years and came Chernobyl, radiation, cancers, deaths, upheaval, relocation again. And then perestroika, which to us seemed like a wonderful thing. Oh, the East is opening, but for them, it meant that the infrastructure of their countries totally collapsed around them. They went to bed one night and woke up the next morning, and every penny they had earned their entire life was gone, leaving them in their old age penniless and without any hope. When I returned from that trip in 2001, I couldn't get these people out of my mind. I just couldn't. I was on a comedy soundstage thinking about them, going, who's going to take care of them? The winter is coming. What about that woman I met? How will she chop the firewood? How could they all possibly face the enormous challenges of old age and illness alone? I was compelled to do something. I didn't know what to do, so I just started the Survivor Mitzvah Project, which now brings direct and continuous financial aid to those Holocaust survivors in Eastern Europe who are without any other lifeline, who do not receive reparations, who do not receive money from anywhere. It started with just the 8 people I initially met, and now has grown and grown, and it's helping now 1,500 survivors in over 7 countries. Thank you. People sometimes ask me, why did these people stay there? Why didn't they leave? Well, you know, some, right after the war, they went to what was left of a home, and they met every train for years, hoping against hope that one person, one solitary individual that they had known before the war, a loved one, an acquaintance, someone from their town, would step off that train. Some too sick to move, too frail. Some tried and tried but just didn't know how to get out, and then the Iron Curtain fell and they were trapped. And some said, I will never leave. They've killed everyone and everything that once was, and I will tend the graves of my ancestors and stay here like my parents did, and I will tell all who come here what happened here. I'm not going anywhere. These are the people I met on my journeys. These are the last of the Mohegans all over Eastern Europe, people in their 80s and 90s who, as recently as just last week in Latvia and Lithuania, took us to the forests, walked me through the old shtetls and the ghettos and the partisan bunkers in their towns and villages, and told us their stories. These are the survivors who have been forgotten, who we remember tonight, the survivors who we visit and correspond with, who have written us thousands and thousands of letters telling us their stories, letters which now have become part of a unique and growing educational archive for future generations. And from these letters, the scope of this tragedy unfolded to me in ways I never could have imagined. As one survivor wrote, if fields were sheets of paper and I possessed gallons of ink, I could still never relate everything that happened to us. Now I'd like to introduce 3 wonderfully talented actors and committed humanitarians: Ed Asner, Frances Fisher, and Valerie Harper.
I am Mara Abranovich. I received your letter, and for that I am very much thankful to you. I was born in 1925. There I lived with my family. My mother died when I was 8 years old. I also had brothers, but they were shot at the start of the war. In 1941, I escaped. I ran deep into Russia. That's how I survived the war. The fate of the Jews who were left in my town was terrible. Those who did not save themselves were all shot, all put in one grave, all together. Children, men, women, and elders. Everybody was undressed, naked, and shot. The whole was covered with lye. Those who witnessed this told us that for 3 days after, the earth in this grave was raising up and down, and that there was moaning coming out of that grave. There were more than 8,000 people in there. This is the fate of the Jews of my town. Today, there are only 6 Jews remaining. Such is our history. With respect, Mera.
I am Manya Kemarova from Belarus. My mother and father had 5 children. When the war started, the oldest was 11, the youngest 2. We ran from all the killing squads. My grandfather and grandmother on my mother's side were burned alive in the hut into which were chased all the Jews who didn't want to leave their native and familiar places. Mama told us they saw a glow and smelled burning human bodies. Among them were her parents, my grandfather and grandmother. We traveled for a very long time to the Saratov region. On the way, my oldest sister was lost. Our train had stopped at the station, and my sister ran to get some water. Suddenly, a bombardment began. The train immediately began to move, and my sister was left behind. There was no hope that she remained alive. We left convinced that one of my mother's children had already been taken by the war. We were already en route for 6 months. The train would move for an hour and stand for a week. On the opposite track, a military train was slowly passing in the other direction. The wagons were flashing by, and for some reason, Mama looked very attentively into the window of each one. A mother's heart. You can't fool it. And suddenly there was a childish cry, "Mama, Mama!" It was my sister, Fanya, calling out from the passing wagon. Soldiers' hands grabbed the child and practically threw her from the train. Soldiers had picked up my sister when she left the train 6 months before, and she had been traveling with them along the paths of war until her path crossed ours. There is more to tell. When the war was over, we returned to our home and found it only in ashes. Our entire little town was burned to nothing. But what happiness it was with tears in our eyes that we were home, although no one had any houses. And so we began to live in earthen huts. Be happy, my American friends.
I am Yudel Lander from Kovno. Dear darling Zane and all kind American friends, thinking about you for long months, I wrote letters to you in my mind, but my health, heart, circulation, eyesight, hearing, depression prevented me from writing. Forgive me for this, don't be hurt. I keep all of your letters. I have never gotten such kind-hearted letters from anyone. Zane, darling, you are like my little sister. The Nazis left me lonely and wounded. I was the youngest in the family. They were all brutally murdered. My mother, with all the old ones, was buried alive. I will never forget and never forgive. They bombed my village, and on that first day of war, the 22nd of June, I lost my youth, my closest friends, my home. In your letter was a photo of all of you, my American friends. It became warm and joyful in my soul, though it's snowing outside and not very warm in my room. Today it is over 70 years since I was wounded at the front and fell down into deep, cold snow and could only feel that my bleeding arm was not torn off. In your envelope, I found a check for $400, a great present from you, my American friends. Great thanks. The door to my flat is always open to you. You've become like my own family. I await your letters as a gift from destiny. Thank you so much from my wounded soul, your Yehuda.
A little about myself. I survived the Holocaust in the Vilna Ghetto. I was a member of an underground organization, then a fighter, in the Avengers, a partisan detachment of teenagers, where we fought the enemy and tried to protect the honor of our people. We are not sheep that go to be slaughtered. Today is very hard on my heart. It's over 70 years since the Vilna Ghetto was liquidated. That was the day when I saw my relatives, parents, and my sister for the last time. I was only 17. I ran to the woods, to the partisans' detachment, not knowing that it would be forever. I am the only one left in my big family. Today, as every day on Remembrance Day, I went to the pits in Ponary, the place where 100,000 people were killed. 70,000 Jews, young, old, children. We stood there by the pits and our hearts were torn into pieces, eyes full of tears. We sang the Jewish partisan song as we remembered our perished family members and those who survived and protected our people's honor with weapons in their hands. I am proud to have been among them. We didn't just die. We protected the honor of our people. Someone asked if I would see my family again, what would I say? I would tell them simply, I fought. I fought for you. I am asked if it's not difficult for me to go often to Ponary, to the killing fields. My answer is, those who lie there can't say anything. So this is my duty to them, to tell their story. There is a Yiddish saying, until my feet drag. And I remembered this at my age of 89. Till the last minute, this will be my credo. I hug you all. At my age, I have a right to do this. Kisses, gratitude for your warmth and attention, yours. Forgive me my letter, it is so sentimental. I just wanted to share my thoughts with you on this day. With love, Fania.
Greetings, my dear American friends. I received your letter. A letter from America is not just a letter, not just paper. Hearing from you tells me that in distant America, someone remembers me, a person practically from another dimension. Running from the enemy, we left behind our comfortable dwellings, left our photos and all our belongings. But about this sorrow, nobody ever speaks. We left behind our old people. Our lives were spared, but our roots were destroyed. Nothing was left of the Jewish community, not a memory, no language, no holidays, no Jewish schools, no synagogues, and above all, no old people. The roots, who can raise the young ones like Mother Earth feeds offshoots and leaves. But these shoots and leaves now had to begin with nothing. And this nothing did not remember its God because it didn't even know its own language. And so it did not even know how to pray. And there was no one to teach, no one to guide, nothing. And that is why this correspondence, our correspondence, is dear to me personally, my dear American friends. You are my roots. I save all the letters, and I have received many from you, and I often reread them. You see, from my past, I have only one thing, just one photograph of my grandfather and my grandmother on my father's side. This is all that remains for me of my life from before the war, although I don't know a thing about them, who they were, where they lived, what they did, how they laughed, and about what and whom they cried over. I will bring this conversation with you to a close. Be happy, my dear ones. Maria.
I am Hirsch from Nemenshine, Lithuania. My dear American friends, I received your wonderful letter and check, for which I am very grateful. Your letter is like a breath of fresh air for me. Other than you, no one writes to me. It is such a pleasure when somebody remembers you. Thinking about you each time, I am amazed that there are such wonderful people as you. I hold on only to this. In my long life, I have learned to understand that the most important thing in this world is goodness and compassion. In the most difficult days of life, you begin to understand a lot. A week before the war started, our family was arrested and sent to Siberia for 19 years. Our father was sent to a camp from where almost no one returned. Only at the end of the war did we find out that all of our relatives who had been left in Lithuania were murdered and buried in one common pit. A lot of time has passed since then. I worked a great deal, studied part-time, and didn't have time to think. Only when it appeared that I couldn't do anything else, I started thinking and got surprised how I had lived all my life as if with closed eyes. I looked but didn't see, didn't understand. After so many years, I still not forget how my mother was crying in 1945 when she found out that all of her family was murdered in 1941. She lost her parents, her two brothers, her sister, and all of their children. She remained the only survivor of the entire family. I was too young then and could not understand a lot. We had a lot of bad things in life. Everything has passed now. Most of all, I regret that when it was time for it, I did not devote enough attention and tenderness to my mother. It was too late when I realized it. With great esteem and love, Hirsch.
I am Dobka Jonas. An unforgettable day happened today. I traveled to my town of Zhezhmir, where I was born. But how painful it has been. I have lost everything here. Everything was wiped out. Every trace that once was. I get a shiver in every part of my body. It hurts my weak heart. The murderers converted my happy Jewish town into a mass grave. Everything stands before my eyes as if it happened yesterday. I knew all of the inhabitants. It is over 70 years since everyone was killed. How Immeasurable is our tragedy. I can't forget even 1 minute. I only think about the misfortunes. Our murdering neighbors were happy to kill half of all living Jews. I ran because my heart propelled me. Run, run fast. And I am the only one who survives today. On me lays the duty to remember everyone. I am 99 years old and weak. How much longer will I live? Soon, who will mourn? I curse the day I was born into such an era of sorrow. I wish everyone good health. There should be peace in our land. Your wishful friend, Dobka.
In 1939, at a crucial point in history, the world turned its back on these people. Today, we are once again at a crucial point in history, a tipping point in history. And today, once again, we are asked what we stand for and who we stand with. Today, as we remember the 6 million individuals, let us also remember their family members who have no one to care for them. Their children, their brothers and sisters, their husbands and wives, their nieces and nephews. Let us remember those who survived so that no Holocaust survivor is ever alone and in need, not on our watch. We can join together on this. In doing so, we can write a more hopeful final chapter of the Holocaust, one of friendship, love, and kindness. I'd like to thank Ed Asner, Valerie Harper, and Frances Fisher for those incredibly moving readings tonight. Thank you so much, and good night.